The air was thick with the stench of blood, the sound of distant creatures howling, and the eerie silence of the hunters' camp. Kothar Shaz, the leader of the Galactic hunters, stood over the human's bleeding body, watching the life slowly drain out of him. "Another one down," he said with a smirk. But as the last breath escaped Alexander Grant's lips, something in the shadows moved, something that shouldn't have been possible. And then, the human's eyes opened. The hunt had just begun. The wind howled across the barren wasteland of Raxor, carrying with it the scent of desolation. Dust swirled in chaotic patterns, a constant reminder of the planet's unforgiving nature. The sun, a distant red orb, cast a dim, blood-like hue over the craggy landscape. Every step Alexander Grant took was a reminder that this place was a tomb, a graveyard for both man and beast. His boots crunched against the dry earth, the sound echoing in the eerie silence of the land. The planet was a perfect hunting ground for the Galactic hunters. Its harsh conditions, lethal fauna, and hostile terrain made it ideal for the kind of game they sought, humans, specifically those of Earth's military stock. The galaxy's elite found pleasure in testing their skills against the inferior species, and humans had become their favorite prey. Alex had seen it all before: men and women hunted for sport, sacrificed to the whims of galactic nobility. A former soldier, turned mercenary, he had never been one to back down from a challenge. But this time, things felt different. He had taken the job to infiltrate a hunter's camp, hoping to learn what the elite were planning. What he didn't expect was to become the hunted. The wind shifted as a series of high-pitched whistles broke through the stillness. The signal. He was on their radar now. "He's close. Targeting coordinates locked," came a voice over the comms in his earpiece. His heart rate quickened, but his face remained emotionless. He had no time for panic. His training kicked in, the years of combat experience surfacing in an instant. He moved faster, ducking behind jagged rocks, blending into the harsh landscape. He could hear them now, the soft hum of their hovering craft growing louder. He counted 5, maybe 6 of them. The Galactic hunters were ruthless, each one a seasoned veteran of countless hunts. They were used to killing humans, seeing them as nothing more than trophies, their lives cheap and expendable. The leader of the group, Kothar Shaz, was particularly notorious. A cold, calculating man who enjoyed the thrill of the hunt, Kothar had personally supervised more than a dozen missions that resulted in human fatalities. Alexander's presence here was nothing more than an inconvenience to Kothar, a minor obstacle that needed to be removed. Alexander knew the risks when he took the mission. He knew what the hunters did, the sport they enjoyed. But what he hadn't anticipated was being left for dead on a godforsaken planet, with no backup, no hope. A sudden shimmer in the air caught his attention. He dove behind a boulder just in time as a plasma bolt scorched the space where he had stood moments before. The unmistakable sound of Kothar's voice echoed over the comms, taunting him. "Come out, human!" Kothar's voice crackled through the static. "We'll make it quick, I promise." There was a sinister amusement in his words. The hunters weren't after a challenge, they wanted an execution. Alexander clenched his fists, the anger boiling beneath his skin. He had trained his entire life for moments like this. It wasn't the first time he had been outnumbered. But unlike the past, this time, his enemy was not human. This time, they were hunting him for sport. He peered from behind the boulder, scanning the horizon. The craft was hovering low now, its sleek silver form glinting in the dying light. He had no choice but to move. If he stayed in cover, they would find him eventually. He had to get to the high ground, where the wind would give him an advantage. He sprinted, zigzagging through the terrain, his boots sending up small clouds of dust with each step. The hunters were close, he could feel them. They had tracked him this far, now he needed to lead them into a trap. A sharp hiss split the air as another bolt flew past him. He dove into the shadows of a crumbling ruin, the stone walls offering temporary refuge. His pulse throbbed in his ears. They were circling him now, narrowing in on his position. He could hear Kothar's voice again, this time closer. "You can't hide forever, human. This is our game. Come out and face us." Alexander wasn't interested in playing their game. He wasn't a trophy, and he wasn't about to roll over and die just to entertain some sadistic alien hunters. He exhaled slowly, his mind working in overdrive. A plan began to form. He knew these hunters, knew how they thought. They relied on technology, advanced weaponry, and overwhelming firepower. What they didn't account for was the unpredictability of a human mind under pressure. His eyes scanned the area. There. A narrow pass led up to a high ridge, where he could make his stand. But he had to move fast. If he didn't, they'd close in, and there would be no way out. He sprinted again, but this time, he was more calculated. He dropped to the ground when he heard the hum of an incoming projectile, letting it fly over his head. He rolled to the side, coming up behind a tall pillar of rock. From here, he could see the group of hunters as they approached, their weapons drawn. Kothar stood at the front, his rifle aimed directly at the rock pillar. He smirked. "You're playing hide-and-seek, but the game's over now." Just then, Alexander made his move. With a burst of adrenaline, he leaped from cover and fired off 3 quick shots from his own sidearm. The hunters scattered, caught off guard, but Kothar remained calm, raising his hand to stop them. "You're quick, I'll give you that," Kothar called, his voice filled with disdain. "But you're still just a man. And we're the hunters. Your time will come." Before Alexander could react, a sharp pain exploded in his chest. He stumbled backward, the world spinning as his vision blurred. Another shot. This one, more precise, pierced his side. Blood spilled onto the ground, his body crashing to the dirt. Kothar's laugh echoed across the battlefield. "And so ends the mighty human." Alexander's body trembled, but his mind stayed sharp. He gritted his teeth, trying to hold on to consciousness. But the pain was overwhelming. His vision darkened as he heard Kothar's mocking voice one last time. "Let's leave him to die. He's no use to us now." The world faded into blackness. The stillness of the wasteland was broken only by the occasional gust of wind and the faint hum of the Galactic hunter's craft as it ascended into the sky. The sun, a dying ember on the horizon, cast long shadows over the barren ruins of Raxor. Alexander Grant lay motionless on the cold, unforgiving ground, his blood soaking into the cracked earth. It should have been the end. He should have died there, another forgotten casualty in a universe that saw humans as little more than prey. But something inside him refused to give up. Some ember of defiance remained, buried beneath layers of pain, but still flickering, still alive. The hours passed. Or was it days? Time had become irrelevant. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, each one more strained than the last. His body was broken, and yet, his mind clung to a single thought: survival. The intense, searing pain of his wounds slowly dulled, replaced by an eerie numbness that spread from the center of his chest, seeping into his limbs like a thick fog. A sudden warmth spread through him, the kind that felt foreign in the cold air of Raxor. The pain, though still present, became distant, faint, like an echo. His eyelids fluttered. He was aware of something strange. It wasn't just his body healing, it was changing. The environment around him seemed to bend and warp, as if Raxor itself was altering him, forcing him to adapt. His thoughts blurred. His vision swam. He heard whispers soft, like the voices of the dead, but they weren't in his language. They were alien. Their syllables were ancient, lost in time. "Awaken, warrior!" The words reverberated through his skull, too loud to ignore. They were not a voice he recognized, but there was something in them, a command, an invocation. His heart thudded in his chest, faster, stronger, the beat of his body now matched by an unfamiliar force within. Then pain. Not physical pain, but something deeper. It was as if his very cells were being torn apart, reassembled, rebuilt into something more. He tried to scream, but no sound came. His throat felt like it was closing, his lungs too small to breathe. Panic gripped him, but there was nowhere to run, nowhere to escape. He could only endure the transformation. His body twitched involuntarily, muscles spasming as something foreign coursed through his veins. He could feel his bones shifting, strengthening. His pulse quickened, but it wasn't just from fear. It was something else, something primal. Suddenly, the pain was gone. All at once, as if someone had flipped a switch. He was still there, still breathing, but he was different. He opened his eyes. The world around him had changed. The gray sky above was now an eerie shade of green, a sickly hue that made the planet seem even more lifeless. The ruins of Raxor, which had once seemed like abandoned monuments, now felt like something ancient, something alive. The very air he breathed felt heavy, thick with energy. He stood up slowly, his legs almost betraying him as they shook with the effort. The ground beneath him seemed to hum, vibrating with unseen power. His senses had sharpened, each sound, each movement, clearer than ever before. The rustling of distant wind through dry foliage. The sharp crack of a stone shifting beneath his weight. The pulse of his own heartbeat, louder than anything else. His fingers twitched as they clenched into fists. His body felt stronger, more alive. The wounds that had been bleeding only hours ago had sealed, but the marks were still there, scars that told the tale of his near death. But there was something more. His skin felt tougher, more resilient. He didn't understand what had happened. But he could feel it, the power surging through him, the energy building inside. He reached up and touched his chest where the plasma bolt had torn through. There was no pain. Only a deep, gnawing hunger for something he couldn't quite place. And then he heard it, voices again, but this time, they were clearer, closer. More distinct. The human rises. It wasn't just a whisper now. The words echoed in his mind, not spoken but felt. He staggered forward, his eyes scanning the horizon. Rising from the edge of the ruins, the figure of Kothar Shaz appeared, his silhouette against the blood-red sky unmistakable. He had come back to finish the job. He had left Alexander to die. He had expected the human to be a casualty, like all the others. But now, Alexander stood. Alive. Something darker, something primal emanated from him. Kothar's cold eyes locked onto Alexander, and for the first time, a flicker of something akin to uncertainty passed through his expression. "You're still alive?" Kothar sneered, raising his rifle slowly. "I expected better from you, human. I thought I had already made you a part of this planet's soil." Alexander's voice came out in a rasp, hoarse from the lack of use. "I'm not done yet." The words hit Kothar like a slap. He took a cautious step forward, his fingers tightening on the weapon. "You'll regret this," he warned, his voice full of venom. Alexander felt no fear. In fact, the more Kothar spoke, the more a savage part of him awakened. It was as if every word, every insult, was feeding a beast inside him. His fist clenched tighter, his knuckles cracking. He was stronger. Faster. But something else surged, a fury that he hadn't known he was capable of. Something far more dangerous. He moved before Kothar could react. Faster than any human should be able to, he lunged, closing the distance in seconds. The ground beneath him cracked as he planted his feet, sending a shockwave through the earth. Kothar barely had time to react before Alexander's fist collided with his jaw, sending him crashing backward. Kothar scrambled to regain his footing, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm at his belt. But Alexander was already on him, a blur of motion. With a brutal twist, he ripped the weapon from Kothar's grip, tossing it aside like it was nothing. "You think you're the hunter." Alexander's voice was cold, low. "But now, the hunt is mine." Kothar, momentarily stunned, took a step back. "What are you?" he growled, glaring up at the human who now towered over him. Alexander didn't answer. He didn't need to. Kothar could see it in his eyes, the gleam of something unrecognizable, something terrifying. The human had returned from death, and with him, the reckoning had begun. The echoes of Kothar's crash into the jagged rocks reverberated across the barren wasteland. Alexander Grant stood over the fallen hunter, his chest heaving with heavy breaths, but his mind was as still as the deathly silence that surrounded them. The hunt had shifted, And now, he was no longer the prey. He was the predator. Kothar struggled to rise, his jaw clearly broken, his teeth shattered from the brutal punch. He wiped the blood from his mouth, but there was no panic in his movements, only growing resentment. For a brief moment, his eyes locked with Alexander's, and something flickered in the depths of his gaze, fear. It was a fleeting moment, but it was there, unmistakable. "You're a monster," Kothar spat, wiping more blood from his lips. His voice was thick with anger, yet beneath it, there was a tremor of disbelief. He had seen humans die countless times, but none had ever survived this long, let alone come back stronger. The pain from his broken jaw was nothing compared to the terror building inside him. Alexander took a slow step forward, his movements predatory, his body now completely attuned to the surroundings. He could feel the vibrations in the earth, the subtle shifts in the air, even the faintest sound of Kothar's labored breathing. His senses had sharpened, as though his entire being had been recalibrated. He was aware of everything, the tremors beneath the surface, the faint hum of distant craft, and the remnants of the ancient alien energy that seemed to pulse within him. "I'm not a monster." Alexander's voice was low, cutting through the tension like a blade. "But you turned me into this." Kothar stood, still wary, his gaze flicking to the sidearm now lying discarded a few feet away. He made a quick, calculated move to grab it, but Alexander anticipated it. He was already on him, faster than Kothar could react. With a brutal shove, he sent Kothar tumbling backward into a pile of rubble. "You think your weapon can stop me?" Alexander sneered. His words were a stark contrast to the brutality of his actions. "It's too late for that. You should have finished me when you had the chance." Kothar's breath came in ragged gasps as he struggled to regain his footing. He had heard stories of humans' resilience, but this was something else entirely. He had underestimated Alexander, thinking him just another fragile human. Now, he realized his mistake. "You think you're better than me?" Kothar's voice was thick with fury. "You think you're some kind of god now?" Alexander chuckled darkly. "No. I'm something better. Something you can't understand." His hand shot out, grabbing Kothar by the throat and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. "You were right about one thing, though. I'm no longer the prey." Kothar's eyes bulged, his breath coming in strangled gasps as he clawed at Alexander's grip. "You're just a dead man walking," he managed to croak. A cruel smile spread across Alexander's face as he tightened his grip, lifting Kothar higher. "I was a dead man. Now I'm something else entirely. And you will pay for what you've done." Kothar's eyes shifted to the side, the glint of desperation beginning to creep in. "You think you're the first to rise from the dead? You're nothing but a weapon. A tool. You're still human." The words hit like a slap, but Alexander didn't flinch. He stared at Kothar, unblinking, as the hunter's struggles weakened. It wasn't anger that drove him now, but a strange sense of clarity. Kothar was right about one thing: he was still human. But something inside him had changed. He could feel it, that dark energy swirling beneath his skin, and it was not something to be ignored. With a final, swift motion, he slammed Kothar into the ground, watching as the hunter's body crumpled beneath the force. Kothar's head struck the rocks, and his body lay still. Alexander stood over him, staring down at the unconscious figure. There was no satisfaction in the victory, no sense of triumph. Just an overwhelming emptiness, as though the battle was only the beginning of something much darker. But before he could dwell on it, the sharp whine of the hunter's craft pierced the air. It was the sound of reinforcements, more of Kothar's team, likely coming to avenge their leader. They wouldn't stop until they had their target. But Alexander wasn't done yet. His transformation wasn't just physical, it had awakened something deep within him. An untapped reservoir of power, a thirst for vengeance that had only just begun to surface. Without a second thought, he turned and sprinted towards the high ridge, his powerful legs propelling him effortlessly across the uneven terrain. The craft above began its descent, its sleek form cutting through the air with ease. But Alexander had no intention of running. He needed to end this, once and for all. As he neared the ridge, he saw them, 4 figures disembarking from the craft, their rifles aimed in his direction. They moved with precision, each step calculated, their eyes scanning the horizon for their target. They were good, no doubt about that. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Alexander slid to a halt behind a jagged boulder, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of a predator ready to strike. The wind shifted, and he could smell them now, the scent of sweat, metal, and fear. Fear. It was the same thing he had sensed in Kothar's eyes earlier. The very thing that had once plagued him was now the driving force behind his every move. He peered around the corner, watching as the hunters spread out, trying to encircle him. They were taking their time, clearly confident they had him trapped. But Alexander had other plans. He moved without hesitation, his body a blur as he sprinted toward the first hunter, catching him off guard. In an instant, he was on top of him, his fist slamming into the hunter's chest with a force that sent the man flying back into the rocks. The second hunter fired his rifle, but Alexander was already gone, weaving through the air, a shadow in the dust. The third hunter never saw it coming. Alexander's hand shot out, grabbing the rifle before it could fire, twisting the barrel until it was useless. With a swift kick, he sent the hunter sprawling into the dirt. The last one, the largest of the group, charged at him with a roar, wielding a blade. But Alexander was faster. He ducked low, slipping beneath the swing, and with a single, brutal motion, slammed the hunter into the ground, his face meeting the dirt with a sickening thud. The fight was over in moments, the hunters incapacitated and lying motionless around him. Alexander stood in the center of the carnage, his chest heaving with exertion. The power that had flowed through him was still there, thrumming beneath his skin, and with it, a sense of inevitability. This was only the beginning. He wasn't done hunting yet. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a dim red glow across the wasteland of Raxar. The air felt heavier now, thick with the tension that preceded a storm. The remnants of Kothar's team lay scattered behind Alexander, each hunter incapacitated or unconscious. His senses hummed with an energy he couldn't fully comprehend, his body still thrumming with the power that had surged through him after his resurrection. Every muscle, every nerve was alive, alert, and ready. Ahead, the ground was jagged, a labyrinth of ruins and sharp rock formations. The shattered remnants of an ancient alien city loomed in the distance, their hollowed-out structures casting long, foreboding shadows. Alexander moved through the desolation, silent, like a predator stalking its prey. He could feel Kothar's presence long before he saw him, radiating with fury and disbelief. The leader of the hunters had retreated to the ruins, his pride shattered, his arrogance broken. He was not used to being hunted, not used to feeling vulnerable. But this time, Kothar was the one who had underestimated his opponent. The faintest sound broke the silence, the low hum of a craft descending. Alexander turned, his eyes narrowing as the familiar sleek form of Kothar's personal ship touched down just ahead. The hunter had returned to the battlefield, and this time, it wasn't a game. Kothar stepped out, his movements precise, his gaze locked onto Alexander with the intensity of a man who had lost everything. His jaw was still swollen from the earlier blow, his lip cut from the collision with the ground, but the rage in his eyes was more dangerous than any injury. "You should have stayed down, human," Kothar spat, his voice filled with venom. "You're nothing but a tool. A weapon, nothing more." Alexander didn't flinch. He stood tall, his fists clenched at his sides. His body hummed with the same primal energy that had transformed him. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice calm but filled with cold finality. "I'm not your prey. You were never the hunter in this game." Kothar grinned, though it was strained, his teeth bared like a predator about to strike. "You think you can defeat me?" His hand went to the hilt of a jagged energy blade strapped to his side. "You're just a human. You're weak. You'll always be weak." Alexander took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Kothar's. "We'll see about that." In a flash, Kothar's blade activated with a crackling hum, and he lunged, aiming for Alexander's chest. The glowing edge of the weapon cut through the air with surgical precision. But Alexander was faster. His body moved with the fluid grace of something far beyond human. He sidestepped Kothar's first strike and, in one smooth motion, slammed his fist into the hunter's midsection. The impact was brutal. Kothar staggered back, the wind knocked out of him. His energy blade faltered, crackling and sparking as he struggled to regain his footing. Alexander didn't give him a chance to recover. He closed the distance in seconds, his enhanced speed too much for Kothar to handle. A punch to the chest sent Kothar crashing into the ruins, dust and debris flying in all directions. "Is that all you've got?" Alexander's voice was a low growl, full of disdain. He moved toward Kothar, who was struggling to stand. Kothar, bloodied and battered, wiped his mouth, his glare now filled with desperation. "You think you've won? You think you've become some unstoppable force?" His voice was sharp with disbelief. "You're nothing but a tool of nature's fury, a freak of circumstance. You're not human anymore. And you'll never be." Alexander stood over him, watching as Kothar tried to rise. He wasn't interested in the hunter's words. He had heard them all before, the talk of weakness, the belief that humanity was inferior. But what Kothar didn't understand was that Alexander wasn't the same anymore. He was more than just a human. He was a force, an unstoppable will forged from pain, loss, and the will to survive. With a flick of his wrist, Alexander grabbed Kothar by the collar and lifted him off the ground, his enhanced strength making the action look effortless. "I'm not your prey," he repeated, his grip tightening. "I'm not your tool. And you'll regret ever thinking I was." Kothar's eyes widened, panic creeping into his features for the first time. No, you can't." But Alexander didn't let him finish. With a roar, he hurled Kothar against the nearest ruin. The impact was deafening. The force of the throw left cracks in the ancient stone, and Kothar was momentarily lost in the debris. For a moment, there was silence. Then Kothar rose again, his body battered but not yet broken. His energy blade flared to life once more, its jagged edges glowing with an ominous hum. His eyes were wild now, filled with a mixture of fear and rage. "You think you can defeat me with brute force?" Kothar sneered, his voice shaking. "You're wrong. I've killed hundreds of your kind. I've hunted the best warriors the galaxy has to offer. And you? You're nothing." Alexander's expression didn't change. He stepped forward, each movement fluid and deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. "I'm not your kind. I'm something you'll never understand." With a final battle cry, Kothar charged, his blade aimed for Alexander's neck. This time, he was more controlled, more deliberate. He moved with the precision of a trained killer, seeking to end this once and for all. But Alexander anticipated the move. He sidestepped Kothar's attack, his body moving like a shadow. In a single motion, he grabbed Kothar's arm and twisted it, forcing the energy blade to drop from his grasp. With a brutal knee to the chest, Kothar was sent reeling back, gasping for air. Alexander stepped forward, his body towering over the fallen hunter. "It's over," he said, his voice carrying the weight of finality. Kothar struggled, his breath ragged, his eyes filled with hate. "You think you've won? You've only proven what I already knew, that humans are weak." "No," Alexander said, his voice cold and unyielding. "You were the one who was weak. You were the one who underestimated us. And now you're the one who's going to die." In a final, decisive movement, Alexander grabbed Kothar by the throat and squeezed. The hunter's attempts to resist were futile. With each passing second, the life drained from his eyes. And then silence. Kothar's body went limp in Alexander's grasp. The hunter was dead. Alexander stood over him, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of a battle fought and won. He had proven what he had set out to prove, not just to Kothar, but to the entire galaxy. Humans were more than mere prey. They were a force, and they would never be underestimated again. As the wind began to stir once more, Alexander Grant turned his back on the ruins of Raxor, the final echoes of the battle fading into the distance. His hunt was over. But the galaxy would soon learn that he was just getting started. The wind swept across the desolate ruins of Raxor, carrying with it the scent of dust, decay, and the faint trace of blood. The battles were over. The hunters lay scattered across the wasteland, their bodies still in the shadows of the crumbling stone structures. Their weapons, their pride, all reduced to nothing more than a testament to their failure. Alexander Grant stood alone amidst the wreckage, his silhouette dark against the dying light of the planet's red sun. His chest heaved with the remnants of exertion, but there was no joy in his victory. No sense of triumph. His body was still alive with the aftershocks of the battle, the pulsing energy, the hunger that he had yet to understand, and the emptiness that gnawed at him. He had killed Kothar. Killed the leader of the hunters who had thought themselves gods. He had shown them that humanity was more than a fragile, expendable species. But as the wind swept the dust across the battlefield, he realized something: victory had come at a cost. A cost he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He looked down at his hands. They were still covered in blood, the stains of his enemies. There was no doubt in his mind that he had changed. The transformation had been undeniable. But was it for the better? Was this the price of survival, this monstrous power that surged through him, this thing he had become? The wind grew colder, carrying with it the haunting echoes of the past, the memories of those he had left behind. Faces of the fallen. Friends he had lost, comrades who had once shared his dreams, now all reduced to memories. Would they have seen him as a hero? Or would they have looked at him with the same horror that now brewed inside him? A distant sound broke through his thoughts. The low hum of a ship's engine. He turned his head toward the source of the noise, his eyes narrowing. Another craft. A familiar one. It was Kothar's ship, now repurposed for someone else's use. The remnants of the hunter's equipment and weapons had been scavenged, but there was still something about the ship that reminded him of the death it had carried. The door slid open, and a figure stepped out. It was a woman, tall and strong, her dark eyes scanning the landscape before locking onto him. She moved with purpose, her steps confident. She wasn't one of the hunters, but there was a familiarity about her. A strange feeling tugged at him, a connection he couldn't quite place. "Are you here to finish what Kothar started?" Alexander asked, his voice devoid of emotion. He didn't need to be on guard anymore. He knew what he had become. He didn't fear anyone now. The woman shook her head, her expression unreadable. "No, I'm not here to finish it. I'm here because you're not the only one who has been watching." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Watching?" She nodded, stepping closer, her boots kicking up the dust with every step. "You're not the only one who knows what happened here. What you've become." He wasn't sure what she meant, but something about her words hit him deep. Something about the way she spoke made him feel like the very ground beneath him was shifting. "I've been sent to bring you in," she said, her voice steady, but there was an underlying tension. "The galaxy needs to know about you. About what you're capable of." Alexander shook his head, his eyes narrowing. "The galaxy? What do they need to know? What are you even talking about?" Her eyes softened for a moment, just a brief flicker of empathy. "You think this ends with Kothar?" she asked quietly. "You think that killing him was the end of it? That the galaxy will just forget about you?" Alexander clenched his fists, a wave of frustration washing over him. "What do you want from me? I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be some monster." She took a step forward, her gaze unwavering. "You're not a monster, Alexander. But you're not the same man you were either. The transformation, it's more than just physical. The power you've harnessed, it's something ancient. Something the galaxy can't ignore. And it's something you can't outrun." The words stung like a slap, but Alexander didn't flinch. He had spent so long fighting for survival, for vengeance. But now, standing here on this dead planet, he realized that the fight had only just begun. And this woman, whoever she was, wasn't the enemy. "What do you want from me?" he asked again, his voice steadier this time. He wasn't sure he trusted her, but he needed answers. He needed something to cling to, something beyond the violent power that threatened to consume him. "I want you to join us," she said. "The galaxy is about to face a war like it's never seen. What you've become, what you're capable of, it's exactly what we need. There are powers out there who want to use you, Alexander. But I'm offering you a choice: join us. And we can give you the chance to shape the galaxy in a way that won't destroy you. You don't have to be alone in this." He stared at her for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. A war? Was that what this was all about? He had thought he was done with fighting, that he could finally let the past rest. But the truth was undeniable: the galaxy wouldn't let him go. Not now. And yet, there was something in her eyes, something that spoke to a part of him he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge, the part that still held on to hope. Hope that he could be more than the weapon he had become. "I don't know if I can trust you," Alexander said, his voice laced with suspicion. "You don't have to trust me yet," she replied. "But you do need to make a choice. The galaxy won't wait for you to figure it out." She turned and began to walk toward the ship. "The offer stands," she called over her shoulder. "The choice is yours." Alexander stood there for a long time, watching her. The wind whispered through the ruins, the last echoes of a battle fought, and the promise of battles to come. He wasn't done. He couldn't be. But what kind of man, what kind of force, would he become? The decision hung in the air, like the stillness before a storm. And as the woman's ship powered up and lifted off, Alexander turned his gaze back to the horizon, where the dying sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold. A new chapter was beginning, and whether he liked it or not, he would be at the center of it. The galaxy was watching. And he, too, would have to make his move.